This is Reynolds Podcast, The Creative Mindset. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Creative Mindset, a podcast about what the future holds at the intersection of creativity and technology. I'm Ray Namoto, the founding partner of I&Co, a global innovation firm based in New York, Tokyo, and Singapore. Today's guest is Angela Onuoha, a Dutch/Nigerian trichologist based in Amsterdam who creates content about hair and scalp care for women around the world. The term, the creator economy, is something that didn't exist 10 years ago. But now it is a growing industry, and increasingly its influence on culture and business is significant to the point where many corporations and brands have to rely on influencers to make their brands known and credible to their audience. I have to be honest and admit that I didn't know what trichology was or what a trichologist did. Simply put, trichology is a study of hair and scalp, and in her case, she's a trichologist specializing in Black women's hair given her own background. In part one of my conversation with Angela, I asked her about her journey to becoming a full-time creator/influencer and how she found her calling in such a specific field as trichology. So let's get started. Angela, it's great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You and I met only about a month ago for the first time.
Yeah.
In Cannes. We were both asked to be on stage. I was one of the three panelists on stage, and you were the moderator at Cannes Lions.
Yeah.
I'd love to unpack who you are for the sake of our audience, and I wanted to hear from you before you became who you are today and what led you to the current place that you are.
Yeah. I actually grew up in a city that I currently live in, come from a household where my dad is from Nigeria. He came here when he was 19. My mom is Dutch. And I do feel like I really grew up with both cultures. Obviously, I live in the Netherlands, so my base will be Dutch, but I did get quite some Nigerian upbringing. And I think that the most important thing that my dad always said was he wanted me to have a very important job. So it's typical for, I would say, like African parents in general to say, like, I want you to be a doctor or a lawyer or someone important. They always want people like that within the family. And that's always also how I approach what I wanted to become. And I picked being a lawyer because I loved like watching Law and Order and stuff. But it ended up like not becoming that. I really noticed that I enjoyed school, but I didn't really know for sure what I wanted to become. And I was so focused on what I wanted. Like I wanted my parents to be proud. So I ended up eventually studying law for a year. But there's a different school system here where I basically failed my exam for French before I studied law. And there was a way to still study law, but I had to do the French over. But then we call it like adult schooling, and I did that in the evening, but I was still able to study law. But the only requirement to continue to study law was to eventually pass my French exams, and I failed it again. So after a year studying law, and I had enough points to go to the second year, but just because I failed my French exams, I wasn't able to go to the second year of law school. So I had to drop out. And that was the point where I felt like I disappointed everyone. Now I have to say I have the most supportive mom. And my mom was like, as long as you're happy, do what makes you happy. So I worked in retail part-time next to my law school. And I ended up doing a year full-time. I was like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do because I actually didn't want to go to that French class again. But that also meant that I wasn't able to get my law degree, basically. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to work full-time in retail, worked at a clothing shop here in the Netherlands, had a lot of fun, ended up not leaving. I went higher up to management and eventually became an assistant store manager. At the time, I was one of the youngest. I was 18, 19 at the time. And what I discovered was I didn't even really like the clothing store, but I love people and I love to train people, help people out. And I think that made me eventually go into that position, training like sales assistants in the store, and eventually made me a troubleshooter, assistant manager. They just put me in every store to fix the teams, which I really enjoyed. But again, I didn't really know if that was my passion, mainly because I felt like it was fun, but it wasn't creative. And I am at heart a creative person. So to give an example, like now thinking about back in the days, because like the content that I make, a lot of it is focused on hair. I used to do hair when I was like 14, 15 in my room. I did it like on the down low, it was illegal, but I put like hair extensions in for people. And I really loved that. I really loved like doing hair in that way. So it was a side hustle. And that was a way to be creative. And within any like management position, like you can imagine as well, it's not that creative, honestly. You're always restricted. And especially if you work for a company, like there are restrictions. And I felt like there were a lot of restrictions.
Yeah. The retail job wasn't creative enough, right?
Yeah.
But even before you went into retail,
yeah,
I'm curious when you started to be conscious of, oh, this is what it means to be creative, or this is fun to be creative. Like, when did you start to realize the spark of creativity in your life?
I think when it comes to creativity in general, and I think that also gives me like that spark of doing it more or implementing it as much as possible, is when you see results or when you're really happy with the end result, even if it doesn't show results to others, and you really feel like I did that. I feel like, for example, like within retail, obviously we were able to dress up mannequins or change the storefront, but it was all within what the company wanted. Like this collection, they even made pictures like we want them to wear these outfits. And every now and then I was allowed to change it up myself. And then to see that people would grab those items because they liked the outfit. So it was like, oh, but because I did that. I think that's what created the spark. So less restrictions, I feel like.
Interesting.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times, so even within retail, you think, oh, but it's a clothing store. You need to be creative. But if you work there, then you realize that there isn't that much creativity. It's really put into boxes and you're very limited. So I think that those moments created those sparks for me that I could show it works. And it's something that I thought about.
When you were growing up in, say, high school or even before that, were there different outlets of creativity that you had? Say, typically when I think of creative or when people think of creativity, let's say drawing, painting, playing music, being in the theater, those are creative, traditionally defined creative endeavors.
Yeah.
And what struck me in terms of what you just said was the absence of restrictions or restraint. You find an opportunity to be creative. But I'm curious, even before the professional, retail, corporate environment, if you had any outlet of creativity in your, say, student life, like could be writing, could be painting, could be singing, could be playing music, could be acting. Were there any other creative outlets? Yeah.
So I think for me, because I did grow up we didn't have that much money to spend, to keep it simple. But I think that I really got that from my mom. My mom is super creative. She saw like a secondhand closet and she was like, it's not fully how we want it, but if we buy this handle or paint it this color, it's good as new. I did the same thing at home, but also when it comes to my clothing, because I didn't have a monthly allowance to spend. So what we did was twice a year, my mom had some money for us to buy our clothes for the new season. And we went secondhand shopping and sale shopping. And I was the best at it. And the funny thing is I had a little reunion a couple of years ago with a couple of people that I went to school with. And they all thought that I came from money just because I had so many outfits. And I was like, no, my outfits weren't even worth like $20. I just switched it up a lot. They were like, but you had so many cool different outfits. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that you looked at me that way because the money wasn't there.
Wow. Interesting.
That was high school. So I think it was like from 13 to 17, I would say. So like during that time, yeah.
Yeah. And when you were in the retail job and when you started teaching, was that the teaching on the job was your training essentially? Like you never had any formal training?
No, yeah, there was. We had a couple of workshops, but no, I didn't have legit formal training. The teaching part, teaching people, interacting with people, that's something that I like. I love to know more about people and not just on surface level. So I think that helped me out a lot into eventually teaching, because if you discover what way of teaching someone likes or prefers or what like sparks their interest, then you can make it fun. So I think that's the thing that I had since I was little.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing, I was on social media. I always got complimented on my hair. What do you do with your hair? Even in store, we're like, what do you do with your hair? It was YouTube back in the days that I was really following American like vloggers with curly and coily hair, giving product suggestions. I was like, oh, I can maybe do that. So I started uploading a couple of videos. It wasn't that serious and it got picked up. But what I noticed with YouTube, I love YouTube, but it's very long form and that takes a lot of time when it comes to editing. I didn't have the time. So when Instagram popped up, that app, which was a photo app at first, obviously, I was like, oh, this is fun. So what I literally did, I literally just took selfies. And my selfies with my hair, like my big afro, they got reposted on like bigger pages. And before I knew it, like all of a sudden I woke up with 1,000 followers. And the day after it became more. That was it was a short period within the app where you could, I think it's the same with TikTok now, that you can go viral and attract a lot of followers. And that happened then.
Interesting. When you started to upload videos of you doing your hair, it sounded like, if I may extract what you were saying, that you didn't have a grand plan of becoming a YouTube creator. Is that right?
Yeah. It wasn't my plan to make it a living. It was just a kind of an outlet that I was like, it's fun, creative, especially when the update came with the 15-second. If I make a video now and I speed it up and then I chop it and then like in 15 seconds, I could do a hairdo or something like that. That's how it basically started. Yeah.
I see.
I think that the reason why I even started uploading, like now that I'm really thinking about it, was that back in the days, straight hair was the norm. So I used to like chemically straighten my hair.
Yeah.
And after a while, it became a thing that I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not healthy. Right. So I started to grow out my natural hair. And that was what I discovered on YouTube as well, that especially in the States, there were like a lot of people that were doing the same and like suggesting products, because I had no idea to like work with my natural hair, with my natural texture. But what I also noticed was in the Netherlands, we weren't there yet. So I think that the biggest reason why I wanted to upload is also because I wanted to be seen in a sense of that, because I think that was the only thing that I couldn't really talk about with anyone over here because nobody was in that scene yet. I think that was the biggest reason why I uploaded in the first place, like on YouTube, and eventually made the selfies on Instagram, because I was so happy that my hair was growing out and I wanted to be like all the girls in America. So
yeah. So when you and I met about a month ago,
yeah,
that was the first time that I heard the word trichologist.
Yeah.
So tell us, what is trichology and what does a trichologist do?
Trichologist has studied the science, diseases, and basically the structure of both hair and scalp. So I just know everything about hair and scalp. And what we do is in between a dermatologist and a hairdresser, basically, because a lot of the times your hairdresser, obviously they know a lot about hair, but they don't know too much about like scalp conditions, hair conditions. And a dermatologist focuses a lot on the skin. So we're in between, the bridge in between. And what I help people with is very mixed. I can help people with just a basic hair regimen because they just don't know how to like style their hair or work with their hair. But I also help people that have a certain types of alopecia or certain types of hair loss to basically also first off discover the source. So what is triggering that? and then create a treatment plan on how to make it better, how to maybe cure it, or sometimes, unfortunately, accept it. So that's basically what I do.
I see. It is a license that you got. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a certification that I have. Yeah. The study itself, it took me 2.5 years, something like that.
Oh, wow. Quite a while.
Yeah, no, it was quite a while. Like you can do it within, you have 3 years to do it. I did it in 2.5, but that had to do with the epidemic, due to COVID, honestly. I had more time.
Oh, I see. From, say, day one or the first week or first month of you starting to upload things on Instagram, from that, how long did it take? Did you already identify yourself as, hey, I'm a trichologist?
No.
Or was it a process to get to the point? So tell us what that process was like.
I really started off with just fun hairstyles. What I ended up doing was posting like weekly hair tutorials. Obviously, the app evolved as well. So eventually I was able to upload 1-minute videos, which was perfect. So I did weekly hair tutorials with pictures of that, but also some product reviews. And I added a little bit of makeup because I also wanted to switch it up. I'm not just about my hair. But what I noticed was I got a lot of messages from people that were like, hey, I love what you do, but I've been suffering from hair loss or I have this bald spot. Can you give me any suggestions? And I was like, I can't, but I would love to. And I think that's also sometimes the beauty, but also the dangerous part of social media is that I, a lot of the times feel like unqualified people give advice. And I did not want to be that person. I also was like, but what can I do to get that knowledge? So I Googled and I eventually discovered Trichology. I did not know it myself either. Like at that point, I did not know. And I saw there was a study. It was called Trichology. And that was a study where you could learn everything about the hair and scalp. It was like perfect because I don't want to be a hairdresser personally. I love to go to them. I didn't want to become that. When I saw that study, I was like, you know what? I failed the law. I failed my law school. I don't have the best credentials when it comes to passing exams, but you know what? I'm older now. I know what I want now. I want to do it. I don't like other people are not telling me to do it. Maybe I should give it a try. So I ended up studying it. I really enjoyed every single minute of it. And it was really sciencey. And I was like, I'd never imagined myself enjoying something like this. But then the exams came. I obviously was super scared, but I passed all of them. It was fine. But that's how I got into trichology. And then I was like, you know what? But I also realized like there's a gap. I love doing the weekly hairstyles, but it misses like again, love to teach. So yes, I teach the hairstyles, but I wanted something more. I knew no one who did that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to implement the knowledge that I have, that I've gained into the content that I make. And that's how I shifted from doing those weekly hairstyles. I slowly shifted into educational videos when it comes to hair and scalp.
And then the reason why you wanted to be certified was having that credibility to your audience.
Yeah.
I see.
I used to do the styling part, so I know how a product can perform, but a lot of people also want to know the science behind a product. So how, for example, how can a product repair hair damage? So I can simplify the science and the technologies of those products and what they can do to achieve that, for example. So I think it would be that makes me unique. It was scary, however, though, because during that time, I already was being paid by brands, but more so for the hair tutorials. So I had an income and what I would say part-time income during that time. It was becoming full-time. Yeah. But obviously, I also was shifting my content. So that was scary. I also was like, I don't know if people like they say they want it, they're asking for it, but I don't know if they're really going to watch because they're so used to the fun part. And obviously I still wanted to make educational part fun, but you never know because it is totally different. It's less entertaining, I would say. It's less before and after. So it took about a year to like slowly implement that and making that basically my niche.
Yeah. And when did you start earning money doing Trichology, or even before you started to call yourself
Yeah.
a trichologist or certified, it sounds like you are starting to make some income.
Yeah.
But what were some of the early opportunities for you to receiving income?
So I think that the first big opportunity that I had was before I became a trichologist was a campaign that I was asked for by L'Oreal. It was actually a makeup campaign. And that was the first time I had a TV commercial here in the Netherlands. It was really cool. But that was the first time that I had to negotiate for fees, and I was actually getting paid quite a lot. And I was like, oh, wow, I can really make a full-time living out of this if I work harder on it. So I think that was the biggest thing. And even it still is a thing. It's really difficult to pinpoint if you can make a full-time living in the creator space. It really depends on what you do. But I had a couple of hair care brands as well that I had every couple of months a campaign for. So those were it was then that I realized, okay, if I do a little bit more, I can make a good living out of it. Yeah.
I see. So it sounds like the main source of income is through brands reaching out to you and asking you to be part of a campaign or endorsing a product or doing that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think that the moment where I really started to know I need to pick and choose, am I going to go for the job that I have, or am I going to invest time in becoming a full-time creator, was when there weren't enough hours in the day because I had quite some campaigns and I was I don't even have the time to film because I need to go to my work.
Yeah.
And the biggest shift for me income-wise came when I signed to an agency, because they really were able to negotiate way better than I could. And I think that's also within the creator space, difficult, a gray area, what to ask, what can you get out of a campaign? Yeah. When I had a good amount of followers and I had an agency approaching me actually to manage me, that was where there was a shift, and I started having a higher income basically because they were able to negotiate way better.
I see. How many followers did you have when the talent agency approached you?
Yeah, I think it was about 32 or 35,000, something like that. It wasn't that high at all. But I think that, so my talent agency really focuses on creators within a niche. So I think that they saw, they acknowledged the niche that I was in and they saw potential in that. And that was also the time where I shifted to that educational content. So I think that's why they had interest in me. I saw the potential, and it was just perfect timing when it comes to the direction that I was going towards and signing with them to approach those brands and to negotiate everything.
Yeah. So up until then, you had a full-time job where you were working 40, 45 hours or so, fairly steady income. And I assume this was before COVID, correct?
Yeah.
At the same time, I would imagine it's nerve-wracking to go from having a full-time job to an unproven quote-unquote job, so to speak, and on your own.
Yeah.
What gave you that confidence? Was it a certain guarantee from the agency? Or tell us a little bit about what gave you that confidence to go on your own?
Okay, so I quit my job, I think 6 months before signing with the agency. Okay. But what I did is I saved a lot of money and I gave myself a 4-month buffer to at least try it. I don't like the what if. I really hate that. So I was you know what? Let's just try it and see what happens if I have all the time in the world to really put into it. Because it always felt like I only was able to give 30%. So I decided, okay, I saved up my money. I'm going to give myself 4 months to see how it goes. If it doesn't work, I'm going to work again. Nothing has happened. Nothing big has happened or negative has happened, but at least I tried. So it was super scary because I love certainty. I love to know what I'm getting into. But on the other hand, I also really realized that I actually got myself into a pattern again of doing things because people think that's good or that's right. So even ending up at the job that the last job that I was at, everyone was so impressed with what I was doing. And obviously I was impressed myself as well, but they thought like the whole creative aspect of me uploading videos, that was, but why are you doing that? Like, you have a good job right now. You're successful at that right now. Look at you. It really got me realized, but who am I doing it for? Am I doing that for the norm that people expect? Or am I doing it for me? And I really realized like, I'm not doing that job for me anymore. What I really enjoy is like creating content. But obviously, you also need to be realistic. At that moment, I was living with my partner. We bought a house together. I have expenses. I don't live at home I'm not a student. I don't live at home anymore. So I have an adult life, which also means adult responsibilities. So that's why I decided to create that buffer and save up that money to at least give it a shot. And worst case scenario, I'll find a new job and we'll be fine. But that never happened, that scenario. So ended up being quite a good decision.
Yeah. So when you made that decision, you had saved enough money to be able to go for at least 4 months, essentially with no income, even if you are making money. Yeah. Okay, I can make a living for the next 4 months or so. So you go independent.
Yeah.
But you said that it was 6 months before you signed with a talent agency. Yeah. So in that 4 months, you start putting basically full-time of your working hours in creating content.
Yeah.
And was it like fairly immediate that you started noticing? Tell me a little bit more about what were the signs?
Yeah, because obviously like at that time I had 2 brands that I had some retainer content that I did for them. So I had a monthly income. It wasn't a full-time income, but like little money coming in.
Yeah.
When it comes to me having more time I was able to also attend brand events. So also show my face to the brands or to the PR agencies over here in the Netherlands. And that helped me getting a couple of other campaigns in and more gifting opportunities. So I also received a little bit more products that I could create content with. So I did see like it wasn't the first month, but so I would say like month 3, something came in and I was like, okay, yeah, we can do this. We're already at 60% of my expenses that I'm covering right now. I only touch my buffer a little bit, so we can really make this work. So I think that it came with that. And the number one thing that made it work was, I think it was in month 3 that L'Oreal gave me a year contract.
Oh.
Yeah. And that was like, looking back, it wasn't a huge contract, but it would cover all of my expenses for at least like a part of that. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I can pay my mortgage and stuff. We're still good. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then it was being signed up with a talent agency. Yeah. But it sounds like even the talent agency makes it easier for you is like the logistics and the negotiation and the contractual aspect of it. But they're not like they're paying you on a regular basis. You still have to hustle, so to speak, at least have presence.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they're just in the background, basically. Yeah, they're my back office, basically, but I still need to do the work.
Right.
But what does really help, at least with my agency, is like the whole meetings, negotiation part. It actually takes a lot of time. The going back and forth, the contracts, the payments. That took a lot of my time as well. So it really allows me to actually have more time to be creative or think about concepts or even talk to them about, you know what, I really want to work with this brand. Can we pitch this? Like even really having the time to create a good pitch to a brand. So that's basically what they help me out with.
Got it.
I have so many ideas and I actually have so many pre-filmed stuff that I just don't have the time to. I just hired a content assistant literally yesterday. It's really scary, but it's also really exciting.
Yeah. Is this the first person that you're hiring?
Yeah. It's really scary.
Under the empire of Angela.
Yeah, I know. Wow. And I never expected that. I actually always said, I never want to hire people.
So that was part 1 of my conversation with Angela Onuoha, a trichologist and a creator based in Amsterdam. In my conversation, the first thing that I was surprised by was the fact that she studied law in college before pursuing her career as a creator. She went through the hassle of applying to a law school and get in, but then only to realize that wasn't what she wanted to do and that she had the courage to quit and then to do something else. Initially, after she stopped studying law, she said she went into retail. She worked at an apparel shop and worked as a store manager eventually to manage the store and teach other people. It was during the pandemic in 2021 that she decided to, almost as a hobby, to create content based on her own experience as a Black woman treating her own hair, but realizing that using, say, chemicals and other types of treatment to straighten her hair wasn't good for herself, and decided to share her own troubles and problems and the solutions that she found herself. And then she realized that even though that sounded and seemed like such a specific category to create content for, there was enough women around the world interested in the content that she was creating. Eventually, she got to a point where she felt that she could be independent and pursue that as a full-time job and turn that into the day-to-day work that she does. What made me realize in my conversation with her, and what actually did surprise also, was the fact that trichology wasn't really her main interest to begin with. It just turned out to be, it was something that she was wanting to get to know more about, just because as a Black woman, that treatment of her hair was something that she struggled with. And it turned out that there was enough people around that would be interested in her content. The other thing that impressed from my conversation with Angela was the fact that she decided to study trichology as a special field and use that as a piece of credibility for her own content. She could have chosen to just keep producing content, hoping that would gain enough following for her Instagram and other social media outlets that she had. But in fact, 2.5 years to study this very specific field to gain credibility, I thought was a key point in her career in becoming not just a creator full time, but in becoming a credible voice in that specific field. Oftentimes, we hear pieces of advice such as follow your passion. And while I do see a point in such advice, at the same time, I do realize that looking for a perfect job that suits your passion is a very difficult thing. Now that I've spent more than 20 years in my career, I realize in your 30s, in your 40s, or even in your 50s, looking for things that you want to do as your day job is a never-ending problem. By the time you hit 40 or 45, you might think that you would have figured out what your life should be and what your perfect job should be. But in reality, regardless of how experienced you might be, perfect job is not something that you look for, and it's not something that's out there. In fact, it's something that you have to actively and purposefully create to suit your interest, your passion, your capability, and your talent. And Angela, I thought, was a really, really great example of somebody who created the perfect job that suits her personality, that suits her background, and that suits her talent. So my key takeaway from Angela was your perfect job is something you create, not something that you look for. If you're listening to this on Spotify, there's a Q&A field, so please do send us your questions and comments. And if you like our podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating. We'll be so grateful. In the next episode, we get into what Angela's day-to-day is like, a day in the life of a creator. So stay tuned. One announcement that I like to make is that I recently started a new podcast called Hitmakers. It is a podcast about how brands influence culture, and I talk with a good friend of mine, Anna Angelic, a brand executive, a sociologist, and a published author. I had Anna as a guest on the Creative Mindset podcast, and since then, we've decided to start this podcast together. It is a bi-weekly show that gets released every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch us on YouTube. Please do follow that show as well if you're interested in topics at the intersection of brands, business, and culture. I'm Ray Namoto, and this is the Creative Mindset. See you next time.